Okay, so now we're talking about the doshas, the three Ayurvedic constitutions. We started with that, so you guys saw the dosha test. If you've done the dosha test, you have an idea of where you fall. Usually you're not one, you're two, right? So everybody has two doshas or sometimes all three. Did you find that? Did you find that you were, if you did, yeah, Mona? Yeah, kind of like it's a balance usually between a
Yeah,
couple.
they're around each, like I do have two that are higher than the third, but like they kind of fall within the same like
Yeah,
10-15 points.
yeah, yeah, and that's typical. And that's the best way to be. You want to be tridoshic, right? So you want to have all three balanced, and that's when you're balanced. So vata is, so again, they're metaphysical. They're not physical like air, earth, water, fire. These are physical elements. These are metaphysical. So they are symbols, right? They're symbolic. You can't go and pick up vata from the ground like you can pick up earth, right? Vata is that which moves. So anything that moves, whether outside or inside your body, is vata. Pitta is that which burns. Kapha is that which solidifies. Okay, and you can have, you'll have access to this. So vata in the body manifests as pain and erratic movement. Pitta as inflammation or heat. And kapha as stagnation or dullness or heaviness. Okay. And so then the Ayurvedic theory of health has to do with balancing these, right? So the gunas and the doshas. So that's what you're looking at, right? And so first, what are the gunas doing, right? So is there too much rajas, too much restlessness? Is there too much tamas, too much dullness, heaviness? You want to bring them into balance, make it sattva. Sattva is balance, right? So always choose, like as an Ayurvedic practitioner, you would recommend or yourself choose activities that develop sattva, that balance. If you're too tamasic, right? If you feel too sluggish, too heavy, can't focus, then you got to do something with rajas, something that builds your fire. Like an engine needs a spark to get started, right? So you need to, so they can see, they can help each other a little bit, right? And again, if you're too rajasic, then you need a little bit more tamas to bring yourself back into sattva. So to find that stillness that we're talking about, to relax and find that same nourishment, nourishing foods to bring yourself to balance. And then the same with the doshas, right? So the doshas, the challenge with the doshas that they are different in your body than they are in the mind, right? So you can be like balanced in the body, but completely whacked out of your mind, or the other way around. Like you can be, completely like messed up physically, but your mind is like a beginner's mind meditator, so they can be unbalanced on one level and balanced on the other, or sometimes unbalanced on both, usually unbalanced on both levels. And that's the trick, right? So you have to really understand that what condition is that, a mental or physical or emotional issue or energetic. Okay, so usually this is how they balance each other. So the doshas have the cycle, a controlling cycle, right? So vata, pitta, kapha. Vata controls pitta, pitta controls kapha, kapha controls vata. Okay, so does that make sense, right? So vata, which is movement, is going to cool and disperse the heat of pitta. Pitta, which is fire and heat, is going to fire up the stagnation of kapha, get it moving. And kapha, which is solidity, that's going to ground and calm the erratic movement of vata. You see how it works, right? So they control one another. In the spine, specifically doshas, in the lumbar, thoracic, and cervical, this is how they usually break down. The home of vata is in the lumbar, sacrum as well, so in the pelvis in general, and in the joints in general. So generally joints, the colon, The pelvis is the home of vata. The thoracic area of the spine is the home of pitta. So like the solar plexus, that's where the fire is, right? That's digestion is happening right here, the stomach. So that's pitta. And you have some muscles here like the rhomboids, the serratus, obliques, erector spinae. Yeah, so these are usually, in general, usually muscles in general are pitta, right? So someone who is pitta constitution, they'll be muscular. Right? Someone who's very thin, that's very vata. Someone who's heavy, that's pitta, that's kapha. Pitta is usually muscular. You know, like Gregory, for example, he's definitely pitta. I haven't met Gregory except for Zoom, but I can tell you right now that you have a good amount of pitta in you. Because I'm the same way. I'm vata pitta. So cervical is kapha region. Okay. The heart, the lungs. Usually when you get, you know, like mucus in the lungs, it's very kapha because kapha is building that mucus, phlegm and things like those are the typical dysfunctions of kapha. So again, this is more along the same lines here, vata, pitta, kapha, the movement principle, the transformation principle, the stability principle. So these are not necessarily good or bad, right? So movement can be good or bad. Transformation can be good or bad. Stability can be good or bad. The location, we went over that. Physical manifestation, so pain, inflammation, stagnation. Mentally, someone who has vata is very erratic. You know, like you meet someone and they're like jumping from topic to topic. They're hard to like focus for more than 5 seconds. That's very vata. Like someone who's very easily distressed or disturbed very easily, that's very vata. Pitta usually is very focused, very sharp intellect. Kapha is very sluggish, like can't focus, just wants to go to sleep. Okay. Emotionally, again, vata is pain, anxiety, pitta is anger, aggression, kapha is depression or love, right? So love is a kapha quality. Okay, in terms of yoga practice and also in terms of Thai massage practice. So here's where Thai massage comes in, right? And kind of interacts with the doshas. How do you practice Thai massage for someone who is mostly kapha or vata or pitta, right? So the same recommendations that go for yoga, you would apply the same guidelines for Thai massage. Does that make sense? Starting to make sense a little bit. So for a kapha person, right? So for someone who is vata, who is going too fast, right? They're erratic. You want to ground them, like you want to slow them down. That means the movement has to be slower, not quick compressions. You can't like work on their muscles like that. You're going to aggravate it. You're going to aggravate the vata, right? You want to slow down, use broader compressions, start with palm press, hip circles. You always want to work on the hips for vata because that's the home of vata is the hips and the pelvis. So gentle grounding, strengthening. Pitta, because pitta is fire, right? So they need dispersing of that fire. So movement is very good for them, but the movement can't be too quick either. So movement that's calming and cooling and restorative, like a yoga practice is restorative, or a hatha practice would be great for pittas, right? With a nice steady rhythm, not too slow, not too fast. Okay, so for someone who is kapha, who has a tendency for heaviness and stagnation, they need to fire it up. They need to have a more strenuous, more heating practice. Does that make sense? And so when you're working on them hands-on, whether it's Thai massage or regular massage, for someone who is kapha, actually, you can go deeper on them. They like that usually. You can stretch and hold those stretches real deep. You can press like your heel into their hamstrings or something and hold it. Like that sensation of stretch is good for someone like that. Long hold, stretching. And in terms of yoga practice, this would be like a power yoga or heated classes, Bikram classes, vinyasa, ashtanga. So all of these are usually very good for kapha. And usually kapha people are drawn to that because they feel great. They sweat it out. Again, it's a general, right? Generalizing. So not everyone, of course, falls under this. Okay, so how do you balance vata? Again, vata is typically a thin person. They have dry skin, stiff, overly mobile, quick-witted, sensitive, has pain that moves. You have a client who comes in and says, I have a pain right here, but sometimes it's right here. And sometimes it's right here, right? You'll have people like that. There's a ton of people like that who like can't figure out where the pain is. It's always like moving around. That's a perfect vata person, right? So Thai massage must be, in a word, slow, because you're trying to ground that pain. Like literally press them to the ground, okay? Press them down to the ground and hold it. So sometimes statically, like even just like holding for a while with your hands like firm and soft, that's what they need. Like these people actually like, take a breath, right? Get grounded. So you use longer holds, but not too deep. Steady, broad compressions, slower and gentle joint movements, especially for the hips and spine. Not too much stretching, because stretching will aggravate vata. So avoiding quick movements, avoiding anything pokey and sharp, so you can't keep poking and prodding them. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen people like that. I can think of multiple people like that. Okay, so how do you balance pitta? Pitta is, like I said, typically a muscular person. They usually have a warm, kind of glowing face, warm hands. They're usually on the warm side. They have good digestion. They have quick temper. They're, usually that's the general definition of a pitta person. So to balance pitta, Thai massage must be flowing. In the word, flowing, right? So instead of slow, this is flowing, steady moving, fluid. Fluidity is really important for pitta people, right? So having a really nice flow in your work is super helpful. That's going to disperse and calm them. Okay, so no long holds. You can go pretty deep on pitta, especially if they're muscular. If they are very muscular, you can work deeply, but you can't overwork the same area. Like say, for example, if a pitta person says, I have pain between my shoulder blades, in my rhomboids, okay? And you look at their rhomboids and they're like really muscular, right? And you can work on it. You can definitely like glide through that rhomboid with your elbow. But if you sink your elbow on that rhomboid and you start doing this cross fiber in place for like 5 minutes, you're gonna make them hate you. As much as you think that they might need that work because they're so stuck there, it's because of their constitution. They're not gonna love it. A fit person can come in and say, my shoulder's hurting. I was lifting yesterday. I was working out, and you start like digging and digging and digging here. My guess is you're not going to see that person again. As much as you think their muscles can handle that because they're muscular and fit, someone like that, someone like pitta, don't overwork the same area. So avoid cross fiber frictioning a little bit, hit a few points and move on. It's okay to do that for kapha person, not for pitta person. Okay. Focus on cooling the fire. So working on the belly, the psoas, any major muscle group is great. So, but not too long again. So the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, all the back muscles, the rectus spinae, all of that is great for them. Okay. And finally, how to balance kapha. So kapha person is usually on the bigger side, strong, big bone, has a tendency for sedentary lifestyle, usually a calmer person. They're good-hearted. They're not easily moved or distressed. Okay, so for them, Thai massage must be dynamic. Okay, you have slow, fluid, and dynamic. Okay, so dynamic is for these or whatever you call it, not stereotype, type of person. Okay, and deep. They can definitely take a lot of pressure. You can use quicker movements like thumb circles and deep circles, elbow circles. So you want to circulate, tonify, heat up the tissue, right? So that's your focus with someone like that. Going too slowly is going to send them into more kapha. So going too slowly is not good for them. Too light is not good for them. They need that deep connection as well. Work the bones, work to the bones like Thai massage does, especially around the heart, the chest, the heart, the rib cage. Okay, so back to vata. Vata conditions are pain, any pain that moves, nerve pain, tender points, trigger points, conditions like fibromyalgia, anxiety, obsessiveness, achiness anywhere, whether it's muscles or joints, hips, spine, shoulders, neck, any kind of achy sensation is usually vata condition. The need to crack the neck, the knuckles, or the spine, that's a vata thing. Sounds familiar? Yeah. Pitta conditions is hypertension, any inflammatory, any itis. Okay. Arthritis, tendonitis, myelitis, bursitis, any itis is sweaty palms and feet. That's pitta. Pitta person usually will have sweaty palms and feet. Acne, hot sensations, sciatica, brachial plexus impingements, right? So any kind of nerve impingement sometimes will be in a pitta person, more likely. Okay, kapha conditions are extra weight, bad circulation, sluggish digestion, lack of motivation, chronic fatigue, low energy, depression. So again, we know people like that as well. We might have been there, right? So how do you diagnose? Okay, there's two examples for you here, client A and client B. Let me actually come out of here for a second. How are you guys doing? Let me just check in with you. I see thumbs up. Okay, makes sense? Okay, great. Any questions, any comments, any feedback here? I will send the PowerPoint to you so you have that for reference. Okay. Okay, so let's come back. It's 12 o'clock, so we're almost at lunchtime. Okay, so one client A is plantar fasciitis, right? So plantar fasciitis, the bottom of the foot, inflammation of that tissue. But when they come in, I could see that they are, in their body, they're a kapha person. So they're bigger, heavier, right? Yet I know that plantar fasciitis is an inflammation, right? It's an inflammatory condition. So that's a pitta that's out of balance. But yet their mind is very active. Their mind is a vata person, right? I can see the current dosha of the mind is vata. So you've got these, all three of them presented, right? They're physically, they're kapha. Their condition is pitta. And their mind is vata. So how do you work on that? Right? So basically, if you can look down the column here, right, you could see you have kapha, pitta, and vata comes up twice because the condition presented, plantar fasciitis, it's pain, right? Pain is vata as well. Even though it's an itis, the reason they're coming in to see you is because they are feeling the pain. So it's a case of pitta displacing vata, right? So that's the language Ayurvedic practitioners use, is pitta causing vata, inflammation causing pain. Does that make sense, right? They use the word displace because it's, symbolic. So pitta displacing vata. So you always treat vata first because that's the pain. They're coming in for pain. You want to get rid of their pain first. Then you treat the inflammatory, right, condition, then pitta. So for you, you would do to calm and soothe the pain first, then disperse the inflammation. You know, with plantar fasciitis, I mean, we're talking not necessarily hands-on massage. This is just a general diagnosis from an Ayurvedic practitioner. So they might soothe that pain by herbal applications, right? Maybe some gentle massage, and that will also disperse the inflammation, you know, kind of a gentle cross fiber. And then maybe they'll prescribe some anti-inflammatory herbs, something like that. Okay, so then client B has scoliosis, right? Scoliosis is the spine. It's in the spine, but the scoliosis is when the spine is stuck, right? It's solidified in a particular curve that's not a healthy curve, right? But this person who's coming in, their general body constitution is pitta, vata, right? So they are muscular and they are thin and muscular. Their dosha in the mind is pitta, right? So pitta, they're quick, you know, have a tendency for kind of anxiety, focus, you know. So then their dosha that they're presenting with the condition scoliosis is kapha, right? Because kapha is solidifying. Kapha is that stagnation that's presenting in the spine. The spine is stuck in a curve. Even though the spine is the home of vata, usually, vata is not involved here too much. So you want to treat, when you're treating, right, this, you want to treat kapha first. You want to mobilize, right? So mobilize rigid tissues, rigid muscles, because you will find in someone like that, that muscles are very tight around the curve, very tight around one side and taut around the other side because they're stretched taut. So your focus is going to be to mobilize those vertebrae through the muscles, relaxing the muscles, and then soothe the discomfort. Soothing the discomfort is soothing the vata. Mobilizing is heating up, mobilizing the kapha. Does that make sense? Okay, so a couple of more client examples. These are my actual clients, okay? So they have names. You don't know them, so it's safe. Okay, so my friend Amanda, client slash friend, she actually, Amanda, they're all back east, so there's no way of you meeting them. Amanda is actually anorexic. She's anorexic. She's been anorexic for as long as I've known her. She is a super awesome person. I don't know why and what the reason is. There must have been some trauma. But Amanda is so thin that you can see individual fibers on her muscles, right? You can actually see like individual muscle strands. She's that thin. And she looks a lot older than she is because of that. So clearly her body is what? It's vata, right? Very, very vata. But usually when I work on her, the condition that she presents with is inflammation. Okay, so she's got a lot of inflammation usually around the spine and the hips. Her hips are aching, but it's not like a pain. It's more like just inflamed. You know, she always thinks that she has bursitis or some kind of like IT band tendonitis. So my treatment is going to be to disperse that inflammation. So I'm going to do some fluid type of work, right? So movement, some gentle stretching, calming as well, because she's so vata. So it's going to be, the treatment is going to be treating pitta, treating vata. Okay. And I'm going to demonstrate that, how that works in a moment. Okay. Then Doug is a big guy. He's about 6'5", and he's heavy. He's very hard to work on because he's very heavy. So he's very kapha, but he has sciatica, right? Although I don't think he has it anymore. But when he first came in to see me, he had sciatica. And that clearly is a pitta condition. It's an inflammatory condition. So my treatment is going to be to make sure he's out of that sciatica discomfort, that burning sensation in the back of his glute and down the leg. So again, it's going to be fluid, soothing, calming, gentle work around the hip and the sacrum, specifically the sacrum. And then, you know, because he is kapha, I'm going to work a little deeper on him. I'm going to get my elbow into his back and basically like get things moving, right? Which he wants that anyway. His body feels really good when you do that. And then Sheila is my friend that she owns a Pilates studio, and I usually work out of her place when I go back to Boston. So she is like the fittest person you'll ever meet. She is super, super fit. She has not a single ounce of fat on her body. I'm serious about that. She's an African-American lady. She runs a lot. She runs a lot, like every day. And often when she races, people mistake her for a famous Kenyan runner because she's this thin and she's all muscle. Okay. She is an amazing trainer. She has about 10 other trainers that work for her, and they're all my clients. So it's a very good gig for me back in Boston. Her mind is extremely active. So Sheila, you know, is someone who, like, when I'm working on her, like, I don't have to say anything, but she's going to talk nonstop the whole session because her mind is just so busy. And it's interesting. Like, it's funny because it cracks me up. Like, when I work on her, she does this. I'll show you because you have to see it to appreciate it. Like, when I'm working on her and she's on her back, and just, oh, let me tell you this. Oh, did you hear about this? Oh, what do you think about that? I'm like, calm yourself down. Like, she's hovering off the mat. She's so active mentally that, and I crack up and I say, do you know, like, do you see your body? Do you see what you're doing? And she's not even aware of that. Like I said, she's so fit, it doesn't even bother her to do like this thing, you know, that she's doing like multiple times during the session. So she doesn't have, when I work on her because I work out of her space. So I always give her a massage and I say, what do you want to work on? And she says, I am good, Slava. She says, you know, I don't have anything going on. She's 60 years old. She's as fit as you can imagine. You know, she doesn't have any issues because she's like a gymnast, very strong and flexible. So my treatment is to muscles because she's so muscular, and for vata, calming her mind, right? Because I want to ground that energy that makes her jump, right? So I want to, like, literally I'll put my hands on her legs and arms and just bring them down and hold them there for like several seconds. And, you know, say, just take a breath right here, you know, so calming, grounding, and working out the muscle tension. Okay, I think that's it from me, from the PowerPoint here. How you guys doing? Did you like my demonstration of Sheila? She's nuts. Yeah, but she's a great person. So, but yeah, you'll meet, obviously all of your clients will fall under some category like that, right? And you can always, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes to categorize, like, how do you actually work with someone who has pitta, you know, a lot of muscle, a lot of inflammation? How do you work with someone who is very vata or very heavy, you know? So you don't want to do the same massage for all of them, right? You want to individualize. Remember how in the beginning I said there's several layers of diagnostics here. The first layer that we're dealing with in level 1, you know, week 1 and 2, is just muscles. What are we working on, right? Just tight muscles, let's work on that. You know, if they're congested, if they're stuck, let's try to free up that movement. That's our first level. The second level is understanding the body types, understanding like how can we individualize the session beyond the muscle. Okay, we know it's the rhomboids, or we know it's the piriformis, but how do you work on that piriformis? Because this person is a vata person. How do I adjust my technique and pressure, right, to address vata specifically if they're a vata person, right? So you want to have that understanding, another layer of understanding here. Yes, Kayla?
It's hard for me to wrap my head around. So when somebody is born, they have an original constitution, right? It's not balanced. Not everybody's balanced. So say someone's more vata, and then as they progress in life, they can have things that are elevated. So they are pitta elevated. So your goal is to bring that to their original constitution, or are you trying to balance the three?
Balance the three.
Okay. So even though they were born with like a pitta, higher pitta, you're still trying to balance the three. You're not trying to get them to the original constitution. Okay.
Well, so what you have to understand what doshas are. Doshas, the actual translation or understanding of it, they're not just body types, they're tendencies of imbalance, right? So these are your tendencies of imbalance. When the person doesn't have any issues, they can have a kapha constitution, but nothing is hurting them. They're healthy, they're loving, right? They're not overweight. They have a tendency for it, but they're not overweight, right? So if they let themselves go and they start eating junk food and stop exercising, that's going to be their tendency of imbalance. But their body is kapha, right? From birth, or vata, or whatever, so yeah. But that's a good question. You gotta head out.
I have to go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah. Thanks for listening in. Sorry, no body work today. But yeah, that's a good question. So let me demo, actually. I'll demo him, Kelly. If you can relax on your back, face up. Just the differences between just relax on your back. Between the three doshas, and again, no one is really one dosha, right? Everyone has a combination of two or three. Like me personally, I know you haven't, well, some of you have met me in person, but you can tell if you have met me, if you see me, like I'm thin, but I'm also muscular. So that's vata pitta, right? It's very common. A lot of guys are like that, vata pitta. Yeah, so like that's just looking at you, I can quickly say who you are, and you can do that too, right? Now that we know what it is, what your tendency is. And you can say, like, if you really let yourself go and you stop being healthy, start eating junk, stop moving your body, your tendency naturally is going to go that way, right? So like if I stop eating healthy foods, I am not going to gain weight. I don't gain weight. That's not my tendency. You know what I'm saying? Like I can eat as much as I can. Like I eat a ton of food because I run marathons. I have to consume a lot of calories, but I struggle with keeping weight on. And so that's, kapha is not my tendency, basically. Okay. All right, so first I'm going to demo for vata, right? So vata, we're going to do techniques that you guys are familiar with, something that's, from level 1. So I'm going to come up, and so I'm going to check the joints because vata lives in the joints. I'm going to move really slowly because I'm assuming Kelly's not a vata person. She might have a little bit of vata, but she's more pitta. So I'm holding each stretch, just a little longer than usual. Slow circles. So remember, the main word in vata practice is slow. It's not for her, vata practice, it doesn't really matter for her because that's not her constitution. But for someone who is very thin and hyperactive, the chances are when you have a client like that, they're not going to be relaxed like this, checking out. They're going to be talking to you. They're going to be saying, "What did you study? Where'd you go to massage school? And what'd you do last night? What do you do for this?" And like they're very, very active usually about the person mentally. All right, so you get the idea, right? So it's very slow, not too deep, but steady enough to kind of get them grounded. All right, if I were to do like a adductor stretch, right? So I want to be really careful with vata because I can aggravate it. So it's going to be very gentle like that, not too deep. And then working on the muscles, not a lot of pressure. Again, slower than usual. And then I'll focus on the hips and the pelvis, even if they don't ask me. Okay, so now I'm going to switch from vata to kapha. Right, so kapha is going to be dynamic, faster, deeper. And the home of kapha is around the chest cavity. So working on the pecs is a good idea. And the rib cage in general. And as you notice, I can, I'm going to move a little bit faster here, kind of making sure that this gets some blood flow, some energy flow, blood flow. Scooping up the muscles right here around the rib cage, the serratus, the lats. And finally, pitta practice, right? So for pitta, I'm going to focus on the muscles more than the actual, spine or joints. The muscles is what I want to address. So I'm going to work on the quads. Deep enough, but not too deep. So the rhythm is not slow either. See, for someone who is kapha, like I can sink in really deep and hold and like cross fiber there. For pitta, I wouldn't do that. I would stay and move on. I wouldn't stay too long. The psoas, I know we didn't do the psoas yet, but that's a muscle that pitta people love to work on. And not too long either. So you're not going to sink in and hold the psoas as the traditional psoas release, which is a minute. This is going to be faster than that. Try to hit some of those muscles along the spine, the erector spinae, and then of course I'm getting my toes under the scapula. Okay. So I would say the biggest thing to remember for pitta is not to do too much cross fiber for them, not to aggravate their tissue too much. I've made that mistake before, and you know, after the client walks away, I always think like, you know what, I think I've overworked it. And then when I check in with them later, they always report the same, that kind of idea. I was like, you know what, I'm still feeling sore from it. And so that's the one kind of takeaway from working on someone who is muscular, because you will see a lot of clients like that, like especially if you're working with athletes, you know, people who are lifting weights, or yoga people, you know, or tennis or runners or whatever. They're going to have the muscles you want to work on. But if you work on it, it's like, think of a runner who just ran a marathon, right? If you ever worked, well, you guys haven't, but like if you ever work races, you know how they have those tents, you know, for runners to come in and you can stretch them and work on them. You can't touch them. They're so sore. Like that's a perfect pitta, right? So the pitta is so whacked out of balance in a runner after a marathon. They're inflamed everywhere, right? Everything is hurting. You can't like barely touch their hand. If you put your hand on their calves or their hamstrings, they're like, oh, you know, that's, and they're very strong. Like you could see that the muscle is like super, like a rope, very strong, and yet you can't work deep on it. So that's the idea, like the, you know, the extreme of pitta is that. But even if when they're not hurting, think of it that way. Pitta people are very easily, you can easily inflame it if you work too deep.